The usual translation is 4 foundations of mindfulness, but you will also hear of 4 establishments of mindfulness. I think there is a more direct and easy way of understanding what this is actually about, because it's not difficult at all, actually. It's just answering the question, what are we mindful of? I quite like the expression which came to me the other day of the 4 workplaces of mindfulness. So a workplace is where you do your work, obviously. So if you were a carpenter, your workplace would be the joinery shop, the woodworking workshop, okay? Now with mindfulness, where do we actually practice the mindfulness? Well, the answer would be in our minds, in a sense. So the workplace is a mental workshop. It's the workshop of your mind. So how do we understand that? I mean, what is there going on that could be a place that you do the work of mindfulness? So the first workplace for mindfulness is the body, or what is sometimes called form, or sometimes called matter, or the physical world. And your own body, seen in a particular way, is an aspect of the physical world. And this is a good place to start, because it's an obvious and easy place to start in doing mindfulness. So the first workplace of mindfulness is your own body. So when you're doing walking meditation, the sensations of the feet in contact with the ground, but just paying attention in that moment to the actual sensations. Okay, how could we make that a bit more subtle? Well, we go to the second workplace, which is mindfulness of feelings, is the usual translation, but that could be very misleading. Because in English, when we say feelings, we usually mean emotions. That is not what we're referring to. By feelings, we mean pleasant, pleasurable sensations, or unpleasant, uncomfortable, painful sensations, or neutral ones that are neither painful nor pleasurable. That's a bit more subtle, because if it were, a toothache, that wouldn't be very subtle, that would be crude. The Buddha's being a bit more refined about it because, he practiced mindfulness for a long time, and his power of mindfulness is very advanced. There could be a slight discomfort in your body anywhere right now, but you're not aware of it because your attention has not gone to it. Is there some discomfort in the knee? Is there some pressure somewhere? Or in your feet, or in your ankles, or in your shoulders? He's moving now to things that are more subtle. So when he says discomfort or pain, he's also talking about mental discomfort or pain. He's talking about mental feelings that can be pleasant, unpleasant. So what he's including there, for example, is a memory of something which agitates me, makes me feel, makes me suffer, basically. Suffer is such a strong word, isn't it? Let's just say makes me uncomfortable. Unsettling, it's unsettling, right? That's a mild way of putting it. A memory which unsettles me. And for that moment, I'm unsettled. I am unsettled. What is this I that's unsettled? But he's not focusing only on negative feelings. He's also saying pay attention to your pleasant or pleasurable ones or joyful ones. We could have some pretty intense pleasurable feelings, sometimes to do with food or sex. But then he's also talking about more subtle things, perhaps a nice breeze on your face when you feel a bit hot and bothered. Be aware of that. But then he's also talking about mental feelings. So if you have a memory which brings a smile to your face, I'm smiling, I feel good about that. It's a feeling, it's something pleasant. But there's a vast area, like an ocean, of neutral feelings that I don't feel any pleasure or pain about, any comfort or discomfort about. If I touch this floor and this carpet, is that pleasant or unpleasant? Actually, neither really. There's contact. I have a sensation, But you see, the Buddha's going to the next, he's going a bit more subtle. So he's now asking, okay, sensation, you've done your bodily workplace bit, now, is it comfortable or uncomfortable or neutral? The answer is neutral. If, on the other hand, my hand was very, very cold and the floor was warm, and I put my hand on it, that's going to be a pleasant sensation. Then I'm aware that it's a pleasant sensation. What if the floor, on the other hand, were too cold, frozen, and I was already feeling cold, and I put my hand on a really cold, icy floor? I would want to withdraw my hand. Aversion, move away, rejection. But the point is to be aware of that. I can be aware that I am now moving away, rejecting, don't want that. So moving towards, attraction, attachment. Moving away, aversion. Now, normally we don't do this a lot, do we, to be honest? See, that's why we are where we are. Ignorant beings that cause so much havoc for each other, for ourselves, and for other creatures. But we have the potential to be much more sensitive and aware of the harm we are doing, and also our potential for care and harmony. What's the third workplace then? How do we make this even more subtle? Well, the Buddha says, well, while you're feeling sensations, and then you're focusing first on sensations, then you're focusing on the feeling of the sensations, what would be the next more subtle step? Well, he would say it's the mind itself. But what is the mind? What does he mean? He's talking about certain qualities of the mind in relation to meditation. The third workplace, or maybe we should now say the third refinement of our workplace for mindfulness, is the quality of the mind. What does that mean? Well, the mind could be agitated, fragmented, and scattered. Or it could be settled, calm, tranquil, focused, single-pointed. See, there's a contrast here. And this contrast comes out particularly well in concentration meditation, where we are trying to stay with one object of meditation. There isn't really a difference between mindfulness and concentration, except in one aspect. Mindfulness is momentary concentration. Concentration is fixed mindfulness. You can't really deepen your meditation if your mind is scattered in that way. You're trying, especially through concentration meditation, to bring down the level of scatter to a calmer level at which we can then pay attention to more subtle things in our mindfulness. What would be other qualities of the mind? Without going into this could be a week's retreat discussion. Because the Theravada in particular are very good at analysing all the different aspects of the mind, and in a very large sort of encyclopedia called the Abhidhamma, they actually go into all the refined details of qualities of mind. Well, a big one, which we've already touched on, is, to put it very crudely, greed and hatred. But those words are too strong. What the Buddha means by this is the mind is wanting something. It's moving towards something. It wants something, or it's moving away from something and it doesn't want it. That is a quality of mind. It could want something really badly, and that will generate suffering. But on the other hand, we are in some state of want nearly all the time. But it may be at a very low level. And because it's a low level, we take it for granted and it's just there. And we just think, well, I can't really escape from that. Well, the Buddha says, well, if you develop your mindfulness, you can. And if you were a dedicated monk, maybe you could escape from it completely. But we're lay people. Let's see how far we can go and benefit as many people as possible. If you pay attention to the quality of your mind, you will see that a lot of the time you are dissatisfied. There's something that I don't really want. there's nothing unusual about this in the sense that it's not just you. This is the human condition we're talking about, right? You may become very, self-pitying. Why have I had such an awful life? Why have I got all these difficulties? Why me? Well, the answer is, it's not just you, this is the human condition. But by developing mindfulness, this is dissolved, not by trying to push it away, suppress it, or feel frustrated about it, or pass judgment on yourself, but by just being aware that this is what is going on, it will tend to dissolve. That's the third refinement of our workshop, or our establishment of mindfulness, is the quality of mind. You see, now we're getting a little bit more refined and subtle each time. So that's your third workshop, quality of mind. Well, what's the fourth workshop? Now this is taking it to an even higher level of refinement. There's a lot of muddle when people try to describe this in the popular books, and that's because they don't understand that the Buddha's only talking about meditation, and he's only talking about refining the attention to the experience. The fourth level is where we pay attention to anything that arises, because now we are assuming that the mind now has settled down. It's not in a great state of want, at least that's dissolved. It's not in a state of aversion to any great extent. It's withdrawn from sensations and so on. So it's now in quite open, spacious, peaceful, contented sort of state. Now, that is like your radio being very finely tuned, and you can just hear that voice on the radio from Hong Kong. This is Radio Hong Kong. You think, wow, Radio Hong Kong. Never noticed that before on my little radio here in Guildford. And then, hear it for a moment, gone. It's very subtle. Wouldn't have noticed it because it's so fine, and I've got to just finely tune to get that particular station. Now, this is where, in this state, anything that pops into the mind, basically, is an object of mindfulness. All arisings. So all dhammas, anything that arises in the mind, which can be very subtle things, but you've already got to have a pretty calm mind. You will notice it if you're feeling quite happy and peaceful and ready to go to sleep. Maybe you've had a good day, right? You're not anxious about anything, you're not worried about anything particular. You might be lucky enough to be in this state now and then, and you're dropping off to sleep. And maybe little subtle things will come into the mind. Little subtle things, a little subtle memory you thought you'd forgotten, or a feeling, or a word from somebody, or a little scene of a place I saw 25 years ago, if you lived that long. Flickers in, flickers out, and you don't really know why. But you see, it wouldn't come into your mind if your mind were agitated, because it would be drowned out by all the loud signals around it. So that's the fourth establishment of mindfulness. Now, as I become aware of those, which is quite an advanced state to be in, really, I can then start to let go of that as well, and being more in touch with things that are drifting up from what Freud would call the subconscious. Of course, some of that might be unpleasant as well. Suddenly some nasty little face appears, or some nasty little memory. And remember, why are we doing this? We're doing this for self-awareness, for self-understanding, because that takes us in the direction of peace. And when I say self-understanding, it's a little bit paradoxical, because we must remember that all the time we are understanding the self in order to kind of lose the self in the greater scheme of things. Because it's the self that is ultimately a delusion.